Hello, this is Eli Shobi. Today we'll be continuing with chapter 10 of Hilchot Shehita. Today we'll be looking at the last type of Tarifa, which is the Shevura, an animal that has fractured some bones. Um, and we will also be concluding the chapter with a list of all the Terifot that we have seen to kind of summarize everything that we've seen up until now. Uh, so the chapter dealing with Shivura will begin with dealing with the rib cage. I'll talk a little bit about the rib cage and how it looks. Um, Again, for those looking at the YouTube page, here is the picture that we saw last in the last chapter as well of the spine of the cow. The spine, as we said last time, is divided into five different sections. The first section, different sections that is composed of vertebrae along the entire length of the body of the animal. The first part is the cervical vertebrae. The first seven vertebrae that make up the neck of the animal, followed by 13 vertebrae that span the length of the rib, of the ribs of the animal, of the chest of the animal. Uh, Followed by that are six lumbar vertebrae, uh, which also have these little protrusions along the sides. You can see that a little bit over here. How the top two are lumbar vertebrae that have these extensions along the sides, followed by the five sacral vertebrae make up the sacrum and connect to the caudal vertebrae, of which there are 18 to 20, that make up the tail of the animal. Now, we'll be dealing primarily with the ribs, although the halachot in today's chapter will also deal a little bit with the ones under this. Um, now, in addition, the area of the thoracic vertebrae, uh, there are also the ribs, which extend uh, from the spine, extend outwards uh, of the and then at the end of which there is another bone called the sternum uh, that runs down the middle. Uh, of the 15, thoracic vertebrae, eight of them connect directly to the sternum, as you can see here. Uh, they connect directly to it, and then it ends in the middle, and the final five thoracic vertebrae do not connect directly to the sternum, but rather connect indirectly uh, to the sternum. Here is a picture of the rib cage in a human, although the numbers are a little different and there are some minor differences. The principles are the same. As you see, the top vertebrae connect to the sternum. Here's the sternum in the middle. This part, you can see the vertebrae of the spine in the background, right in the back. And then uh, the bottom ribs do not connect directly, but rather indirectly will connect to the sternum. In the human, the last two ribs don't connect at all. However, in the cow, they do. So that does not exist in the cow. Okay. Now, we also went over a little bit about what the vertebrae look like. Just I'll emphasize it again because it's relevant for our chapter as well. So this is a picture of what the vertebrae look like, um, right, without the ribs, right? So they have a skeletal structure a little bit like this. They're a little different depending on which section of the spine we're talking about, but more or less. Here on the bottom, there's the body of the vertebra, um, with its bone marrow, etc. A hole a little bit above that, through which goes the spinal cord. Okay, the spinal cord goes through all the vertebrae, as we saw last chapter. And then there are protrusions along uh, uh, the end and the sides. And these protrusions, little extensions of the bone, are called processes. And these, especially these transverse processes, which go outwards to the sides, um, you'll see they vary in length a little bit depending on the section of the of the of the uh, of the vertebrae that we're talking about, right? So, for example, here we can see the last two lumbar vertebrae extend out pretty far. Uh, Even the first two sacral vertebrae extend out a little bit, and the last three sacral vertebrae do not have these extensions very much. Right? You don't see them coming out really. Um, Okay, now all of that will be relevant for this chapter. Um, I will address, however, that there are a few different ways to understand Rabbenu in this chapter, and I will present my understanding that I think is correct. However, I'll also describe a little bit what others have said, uh, because there are competing understandings. No, halacha aleph. Tehuah kisvat. What do we mean by fracture? This is a case where the animal has fractured a majority of its of its ribs. צלעות הבהמה הן 11 מכאן ו11 מכאן. And the ribs of the animal are 11 from this side and 11 from this side. I will, right now, I'm only going to translate the halakha, halachot aleph and the beginning of halakha bet, and I'll return to it to explain a little bit. And then we'll go into it a little bit more deeper. נשתברו 6 מכאן ו6 מכאן, או 11 מכאן ו1 מכאן, תרפה, והוא שהשתברו מחסיין של לימוד השדרה. If 6 of them were fractured on this side and 6 on this side, or 11 on this side and 1 on this side, this is a tarifa, meaning so you end up having a total of 12 fractured bones, and this is a majority uh, of the of the 22 that we're referring to here. And this is so long as the fracture on the half of the ribs that are closer to the spine. נשתברו 6 מכאן ו6 מכאן, אם היו סלעות גדולות שיש בהן מוח, טרפה, ואם לאו, אף על פי שהן רוב, אף על פי שנשתברו כלפי השדרה, מותרת. If 6 of them fractured on this side and 6 on this side, then if these 12 are large ribs that have a moach, also this word, I will return to it in a second. Moach usually refers to anything that is some sort of substance that is inside or that is covered by the bone. So if they are of the large ribs that have a moach, then it is a terefa. But if not, then even though they make up a majority of the ribs, and even though they were fractured on the side that was closer to the spine, the animal is still permitted. Okay, I will now address deeper questions of the Chav, trying to understand what Rabbeinu was referring to. I'll begin first by saying that we just saw that the animal, that the cow, has 13 thoracic vertebrae and 13 ribs, not 11. Uh, so, uh, so that is first question that needs to be addressed here. What Rabbeinu was referring to, and secondly, what are these selaot that have a moach? So first I'll explain how the Maqbili edition understands the Salaha. Um, they claim that the last two of the 13 ribs do not have marrow in the same way that the top 11 do. And that therefore, when Rabbeinu is listing only 11 on each 11 pairs, he's referring only to the top 11 ribs, and he is not including the bottom two ribs, which are not included for these purposes, as you can see in Halakha Bet, where it is only referring to Tzelaot Gedolot that have moach, and moach they describe as marrow. That is the explanation of Maqbili for this halakha, for these halachot. I, however, am not convinced that that is correct. I have consulted multiple sources, and I do not see any reason to see that the bottom two ribs do not have marrow. I don't think that that is accurate. I think that they have the same marrow as the other ribs. I haven't seen any reason to say otherwise. So of course, this depends on uh, reality of seeing how those bones are made. If what they describe is anatomically true, then that explanation is certainly possible. However, I'm not convinced that that is correct. Um, the second explanation requires knowledge of another halakha from Hilchot Ma'aseh Korbanot, which we'll see in a separate, in a later volume of the Mishne Tora. And there, Rabbeinu explains that the top two ribs are included within gifts that are given to the Kohanim. Uh, in certain korbanot. And these korbanot, the gifts that are given to the Kohanim include the hazeh and the shok haimani, the right front limb, a part of the right front limb, as well as the hazeh, the chest. And included in the chest is the top two silaot, the top two ribs. Now, there are some people who say the top two ribs means the top one pair, meaning so one on the right and one on the left. And then we would still have a problem because then there should be 12 pairs, not 11. That subtracted one. Uh, so some claim that this is that this is the case, that it's only one pair, and then the last one also does not count, and they give various reasons for why it does not count, none of which really convinces me. So I won't go into it. Uh, what I believe is the correct understanding here is that the top two tzelaot, the top two ribs that are part of the gift of the hazeh, include the top two pairs, meaning so two on the right and two on the left. And this, I think, is the correct opinion according to Rabbeinu. And therefore, even though they are like the ribs for all intents and purposes biologically, um, legally speaking, they are not considered to be a part of the Selaot, but rather a part of the Hazeh. Even though in Hulin, in non sacred like in regular slaughtered meat, even though this gift is not given, they are still considered to be part of the hazeh and not part of the tzila'ot. And therefore, we do not begin with the top two ribs, but rather from the third rib and onwards, and then there are only 11 tzila'ot. This is what I understand to be the correct understanding of this halakha. Though I would be interested to hear if other people think otherwise. Now for the second element in halakha bet that deals with the sila'ot, that the large sila'ot that contain moah. So again, according to Makabili, the moah is the bone marrow, um, and that is consistent with how they understand halakha alif, if it matches reality. Um, I understand the moah here to be referring to the sternum, um, and that the sela'ot gedolot are referring to the ribs, as opposed to sela'ot ketanot, which would be referring not to ribs, but rather uh, to the protrusions that come out of the lower vertebrae. So again, looking at this picture, for example, so here in the lumbar vertebrae that are below these thoracic vertebrae that contain the rib cage. So in the lumbar vertebrae, they have these extensions, and these would be considered sila'ot qetanot, she'en bahem moach, since they do not end with any with a sternum. Right. So in this picture, you can see, so all of these, all 13 or all 11 up past the right, taking out the top two, all 11 of the ribs would be tzila'ot gedorot sheyesh bahem moah, since they all connect either directly or indirectly to the sternum. And then we have the six lumbar vertebrae, which you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that all have these sila'ot, these smaller sila'ot. And then even the first two sacral uh, vertebrae have also a small sela. And then the final two, I don't say three because this last one, as we saw in the previous chapter, is not included in the shidra for our purposes. Right, the shidra ends at the end of the second to last sacral vertebra. So then uh, there are two vertebrae that do not have any moah. Sorry, that do not have sila'ot. Um, and all of the ones above them between the sacrum and the rib cage, meaning the lumbar vertebrae and the top sacral vertebrae, are chuliot that have sela'ot, but that do not she'en behem moach, that do not have a any do not connect with the sacrum, with the um, with the sorry, I just forgot the name of this bone in the middle. Okay. Um, so now I'll explain again the halakha. According to my understanding, again, I hope I have it correct. Uh, so um, so if a majority of the 11 seda'ot are broken, are fractured, then it is a tarifa. And if it's six and these are referring to the ribs that have moach, that have that connect um, with the bone in the middle. with the okay. The continuation of הלכה ב'. וכן, אם נעקרו רוב צלעותיה טרפה, ואם נעקרה אפילו סלע אחת וחצי חולייתה עמה, והסלע תקועה בה, הרי זו טרפה. And so too, if a majority of its its ribs were dislodged, it is also a tarifa. And if even only one rib were dislodged and half of a vertebra with it, right, and that the vertebra is what the rib is attached to, then this is a tarifa. Right? So normally we need a majority, but here even only one is sufficient to make it a tarifa if at least half of the vertebra is dislodged with it. וכן אם נעקרה מן השדרה חוליה אחת, אפילו הייתה מן החוליות שלמטה מן הכסלים שאין בהן סלעות, הרי זו טרפה. And so too, if even only one vertebra were dislodged from the spine, and even if we're referring to the vertebrae that are under the kesalim, which I'll also come back to in a second, that are under the kesalim, which do not have any silaot, that do not have any ribs, then this is also a tarifa. Okay. Now going back to picture, so we said we have the thoracic vertebrae, followed by the lumbar vertebrae, followed by the sacrum. Okay, now in the hip joint of the animal, where the femur and then the rest of the leg connects to, right? It connects to the top of the sacrum, right? And this area, the hip joint, connects the femur with the pelvic girdle, right? With the pelvis. And the pelvis also connects together with the sacrum. Okay, so now this area, the fats that are above this area are called the halev she'ala kesalim, and are prohibited, as we have already seen in Hilchot Ma'achalot Asurot. So here, when Rabbeinu is referring to the chuliot that are the vertebrae that are under the kesalim, he is referring to the sacral vertebrae, right, which are below the pelvis, right? Yes, which are below the pelvis. And I do not agree with this picture of how the Makbili edition understands the halakha, because here is the area where of the kesalim, of where the yarech, where the femur connects with the hip joint, and what is under that should be going this way towards the sacrum, and then these right. So if it connects over here, right? This is the top of the sacrum. So if this is where the pelvis connects to, so then under it are the choliot, are the vertebrae that do not have any tzilaot. Above it, however, there are tzilaot. But according to the Makbili understanding of Halachot Aleph and Bet, where we're not referring to any of this, but rather only to the tzeda'ot that are the ribs, and that this is where it ends. So then right under that, for them, should be this. However, I do not think that that is correct, since it's also not the area that is lemata mina kesalim. אוקיי. הלכה ג' בהמה שנשמת הירך שלה מעיקרו ויצא מן הכף שלו, אם נתעכלו ניבה, והן היתרות שבעצם הכף, שיוצאות על העצם הזכר ואוחזות אותו, הרי זאת טרפה. ואם לא נתעכלו, מותרת. Okay. So now I'll go back over the hip joint, which we have spoken about a little bit earlier in one of the earlier chapters, and also a little bit just now, but I'll describe it a little bit more in depth. So the hip joint is the top of the leg of the animal, or the hind leg of the animal, right over here, which connects the femur to the pelvic girdle. Now, the pelvis is made up of three different bones. The ilium, the ischium, and the pubis are the three bones that make up the pelvis. And the joint at which the two bones, right, the pelvis and the femur, the point at which they connect, right? So it's called the area of the pelvis that connects to this is called the acetabulum. Okay, and this joint, this hip joint, is kind of like a ball and socket joint, where the femur has this kind of ball at the top. At the top, it's called the femoral head, at the head of the femur, and the acetabulum is like a socket which the femur goes into, and this is why it's called a ball and socket joint. And so okay, so by kaf here, Rabbeinu is referring to the socket of the joint, the acetabulum. The asim kaf is the bone that contains that socket, which is the pelvic girdle, and the asim zachar in this halacha is the femur, right? Or the femoral head, which goes into the socket. Okay. So let's read the halacha. בהמה שנשמת הירך שלה מעיקרו ויצא מן הכף שלו. So an animal that its femur has been dislocated from its root, from the place that it is supposed to be, and it comes out of its socket, right? It comes out of the acetabulum. אם נתעכלו ניביו, והן היתרות שבעצם הכף שיוצאות על העצם זכר ואוחזות אותו, הרי זאת טרפה. If the ligaments or the strings, right, which are the ligaments of the pelvic girdle that come out and connect to the bone, the asim zachar, right, the femoral head, the part of the femur which goes into the socket, and grab it, right? Because that's what ligaments do. Ligaments connect between bone to bone. So if those ligaments were deteriorated, then this is a tarifa. But if not, then the animal is permitted. וכן הלכה ד' וכן בעוף, אם נשמת ירחו טרפה, נשמת כנפו מעיקרו, חוששים שמא נקבה הריאה שלו, ולפיכך בודקין אותה ואחר כך יאכל. ובהמה שנשמתה ידה מעיקרה, מותרת ואין חוששים לה. And so too in the bird, if its thigh, right, the femur is the thigh bone, right, so if its thigh bone were dislodged, then it is a tarifa. If its wing was dislodged from its root, right, then as we saw in an earlier chapter, the wing is treated like the front limbs of the animal, and if it was broken or if it was cut, then this does not make it a tarifa. or if it were born missing, if it were removed, right? It's not this does not make it a tarifa. But if it were dislodged, right, it was dislocated, then we suspect it does not become a tarifa because it's not there, but we suspect that that the bird's lungs may have been punctured, and therefore we must check it and only then eat it. And an animal whose front limbs, right, the front two legs, were dislodged from their root, this is permitted, and we do not suspect anything regarding it. Right, we don't suspect that its lungs may have been punctured or anything else. ולגולף בהמה או חיה שניטל ממנה כסלע, אף על פי שלא נקרא בחירום, טרפה. The skull of an animal, or of a domesticated animal or undomesticated animal, that was removed from it, even the amount of a sela, and a sela is a certain volume, which we discussed in the previous chapter in Al-Chavav. Even though it's the membrane of the skull was not punctured, this is a tarifa. And if the skull has punctures that cause the skull to be missing some of it, right? So it's not a weak puncture like a needle would do, rather kind of like a cut where there's like a hole, right? So if there are holes in the skull, then they're smaller than a sela, then they all should measure together to see if they add up to a sela. וכן גולגולת שנחבש רוב גובהה ורוב היקפה, טרפה, אף על פי שהחירום שלם ולא חסר ממנו כלום. And so too, a skull that the majority of its height and the majority of its circumference were crushed, this is also a terefa. And even though the membrane that covers it is still whole and is not missing anything. If the majority of النحباس رוב גובהה והרי רוב היקפה קיים, או שנحבס רוב היקפה והרי רוב גובהה קיים, הרי זו ספק טרפה. ויראה לי שאוסר לנעותה. If, however, what was crushed was only the majority of height, and then the majority of its circumference is still standing, or still fine, right? So, right, what we measure around the skull, right, is still fine, but along the top, right, so that is not. Or the other way around, or if the circumference around were crushed, but going up is still fine, then this is a terefa out of doubt. And Rabbenu here says that it seems to him that this should be prohibited. And again, it seems to him, Rabbenu was indicating that this is not a halakha pesukha, is not a fixed law, rather is his opinion regarding this law. הלכה זין, עוף של למים כגון אווזים, אם נקב עשם גולגולתו, אף על פי שלא נקב חירום של למוח, טרפה, מפני שחירום אורח. A water bird, or like a bird of that lives in the water, such as a duck, if there is a puncture in its skull, even though the membrane of the brain was not punctured, right? And this we also talked about in a previous chapter, that the puncture needs to go through the membrane of the brain, and these membranes are called the meninges, of which there are two in the halakha. Although we today in science we say that there are three, There is the dura mater, which is the outer membrane, the arachnoid mater, which is the middle membrane, and the pia mater, which is the membrane that is closest to the brain. Hachamim said that there were two, and this makes sense since the top two membranes, the dura mater and the arachnoid mater, there's nothing separating them, as opposed to between the arachnoid mater and the pia mater, there is a cavity through which goes fluid, and this cavity is what separates the top two from the bottom one. So Hachamim just consider the top two to be one membrane. So according to so here, even so, if there is uh, a puncture through the skull, but even though there is no puncture through the meninges of the brain, right, of the outer membrane of the brain, this is still a Tarifa, since its membrane is very soft. Right? The membrane of the bird that lives in the water is softer than the regular bird. עוף היבשה שכתור חולדה על ראשו או שניגף באבן או בעץ, מניח ידו בצד הנקב ונועץ, או מכניס ידו לתוך פיו ודוחק למעלה. אם יעשה המוח מן הנקב, בידוע שניקב חירום וטרפה, ואם לאו מותר. A bird of the land, right? So it has a harder membrane that that a weasel hit it on its head, or right, it doesn't have to be specifically a weasel, which we did see regarding the derusa, right? The derusa had specific animals that were sufficient for causing it to be considered derusa, and the hulda was one of them for birds. Um, but that is not what we're referring to here, since here the Tarifa is not because of derusa, but rather because of this damage to the bone to the skull. Um, so it does not necessarily have to be a khulda. So if a, the khulda, if the weasel hit him in the head, or if he were injured by a stone that fell on him or by wood, then we check. We place our hand next to the puncture that was made, and we squeeze. Or alternatively, we can insert our hand into the mouth of the bird and push upwards. If a part of the brain starts to ooze out of the puncture, then we know with certainty that the the membrane was punctured and it is a terefa. But if not, if we don't see the brain coming out, then it is permitted. בהמה שאחזה דם, או שהייתה מעושנת או מסוננת, או שאכלה סם שעורר את הבהמה, או ששתה מים הרעיים, הרי זו מותרת. אכילה סם שעורר את האדם, או שנשכה נחש וכיוצא בו, מותרת משום טרפה, או אסורה משום סכנת נפשות. So הלכה ח' an animal that has seen blood, meaning so that um, it became sick and uh, and it's having you see a lot of blood in it, right? Uh, its face is becoming bloody, or uh, just blood is starting it can be seen on its outward expressions, or if it inhaled a lot of smoke and became sick because of this, right? That it, which also has a certain look, or if it got like a frostbite or something, or it was out in the cold and it also became sick because of that, or if it ate any sort of poisonous food that is fatal for an animal, or if it drank some poisonous liquid. So in all of these cases, this animal is permitted, right? Since none of these is included in the list of terefot that we saw. If, however, it ate a poisonous food that is fatal for humans, or if a snake bit it and something like this, right? A snake that is venomous, then it is permitted as from the laws of Tarifa, right? These things do not make it a Tarifa, but it is prohibited because of sakanat nefashot, because we are afraid that it might that since it consumed these poisons that are fatal for humans, we are worried that if a human eats them, that it might also receive this and get infected by these poisons and die. So it is prohibited to eat these because of sakanat nefashot, for safety reasons. Um, in this halakha, Rabbeinu will now go back over and summarize all of the cases of tarifa that we have seen up until now. נמצאו כל הטרפות המנויות כשיפרסו, ואפשר שימצאו בבהמה וחיה טבעיים, ואלו הן על סדר שנתבארו בחיבור זה. So it ends up being that the terefot which were counted when they are listed separately and that are possible to occur in the domesticated animal and in the undomesticated animal, these are 70. And these are they in the order in which they have been explained in this book, in the order in which Rabbeinu brought them in these chapters. So one is the Aleph Derusa, a case where the animal, a prey, was attacked by a certain predator. Bet Nikav Tarbes Haveshet. Two is if the pharynx was punctured. Gima Nikav Kerum Shelamoach. Three, if the membrane of the brain was punctured. Nitmasmes Hamoach Asmo. If the brain itself became liquefied. Hey, Nikav Lev Levet Halalo. If the heart were punctured into its cavity. Vav, niqav qene halev, if the pulmonary artery were punctured. Zain, niqeva hamara, if the gallbladder were punctured. Het, niqevu qene hakavev, if the hepatic artery or the portal vein were punctured. Tet, niqeva hakeva, if the omasum, right? We said that the cow has four stomachs. The first of which is the kares, which is the rumen. The second is the beta kosot, the reticulum. Third is the mesos, which is the omasum. And the fourth is the qeva, which is the abomasum. Right? So tet niqeva qeva, if the abomasum was punctured. Yod niqava kares, if the rumen were punctured. Yod aleph niqava mesos, if the omasum were punctured, and Yod Bet niqab beta kosot, if the reticulum were punctured. Alcha Yod Gim, or 13th, nikevu me'eha, if its intestines were punctured. Yodalet yaseu me'aim nachus unehepchu, if the intestines fell outward from the body of the animal and lost their form, right? That all the intestines kind of splattered everywhere and lost their structure. Tedvav, niqavat tehol be'ovyo, if the spleen were punctured in a certain width, depending on where it was punctured, and this we saw was unique to the cases of puncture, since normally the puncture is bemashio, even in just a little bit, whereas here there is a certain width that needs to be done, and this is because the tehol is not included in the list of the terefot of punctured, as we'll see in the continuation in the next halacha. Yodvav, hasera hamara. If the gallbladder were missing, right? If we were born without a gallbladder. I'll also note here that in as the Sephardic tradition used to do, 16 is marked by Yod Vav and not by Tet Zayin. Only Yod He is not written, since that is God's name, but Yod Vav is written. Yod Zayin, Nimseu Shte Merot, if it had two gallbladders. Yod Het, Hasera Qeva, if it were missing its the abomasum. Yod Tet, if Nimseu Shte Qevot, if it had two abomasums. Kaf, Hasar Kares, if it were missing the rumen. Kaf Aleph, Nimseu Shne Keresim, if it had two rumens. Kaf Bet, Hasar Mesos, if it were missing its omasum. כ"ג נמצאו שני מסוסים, if it had two omasums. כ"ד חסר בית הכוסות, if it were missing its reticulum. כ"ה נמצאו שני בתי כוסות, if it had two reticula. And in all these cases, I'll just remind that if it had an additional of something that it shouldn't have had it, then that is considered equivalent to if it were missing it. Right? So if you have two gallbladders, that's the same as if it were missing a gallbladder. Kavav, hasar ehad min ha'me'ayim, if it were missing one of its intestines. Kavzayin, msinu shnei ben ha'me'ayim, if it had two sets of intestines. Kafshet, miqeva hare'ah, if the lung were punctured. Kaftet, niqav ha'paneh lemata b'makom she'enu ra'ui l'shehita, if the trachea were punctured in the lower part, in the area that that is no longer fit for slaughter. Lamed, niqav simpon misimpone re'ah, if one of the bronchi of the lung were punctured, afilu lahavero, and even if the puncture of from the bronchi entered into another one of the branches, such that it sealed it, this is still a tarifa. Lamed Aleph, ne'etam makom min hare'ah, if an area of the lung were sealed, such that air not pass through. Lamed Bet, nimok simpon misimpone re'ah, if one of the bronchioles of the lung became liquefied. Lamed Gimel, nimset lecha serucha bere'ah, if we found some sort of fluid that smells bad in the lung. Lamed Dalet, nimseu bah mayim seruchin, if we find in the lung water that smells bad. So the first one is fluid and this one's water. Lamed He, nimseu bah mayim achurin, if we find in the lung water that is unclear, that is not clear, it's like gray or dark and dirty. Lamed Vav, nitmasmesa hare'ah, if the lung was liquefied. Lamed Zayin, nishtanu mar'eha, if its appearance, meaning its colors, changed. Lamed Het, nehepacha weshet mar'av, if the esophagus switched with its colors, meaning so that instead, the esophagus has two layers. The inner layer is white and the outer layer is red. So if they switch so that the inner membrane of the inner layer of the esophagus were red and the outer layer were white, this is a terefa. Lametet, hasera hare'ah minyan ha'unot, if the lung were missing any one of its lobes, right? That as we saw that there are three lobes on the right lung and two lobes on the left lung, and then also the two umoth, and also the two larger lobes on the bottom, as well as an accessory lobe that is near to the right lung. So if either side of the lungs was missing one of its lobes, with the exception of the accessory lobe, then this is a tarifa. Mem, يتحلفوها أنوث. If the right and left lungs switched their lobes. So if instead of three lobes on the right lung and two on the left, if there were two on the right and three on the left, this is a tarifa. Mem alif, هثيرها أنوث من جبه. If there were an extra lobe on the dorsal side of the lung, meaning on the side of the lung that's facing the back of the animal. ميم يتحلفوها أنوث. Uh, sorry, I just read. من بيت نسمخها أنا لأنا شلو كسيدران. If an adhesion were formed from one lobe to another lobe, but not in order, right? So if the first lobe had an adhesion that connected it to the third lobe, this makes it a tarifa. من جيما نمسسها رئة بلوح يتوق أذنين. If the lung does not have any of the crevices that that separate the various lobes, right? So you see the lung as if it's one piece, and you don't see any lobes. ممدالك حسار مقصات الرئة. If a part of the body of the lung were missing. Memhe yavash miqsat gufa. If a part of the body of the lung became dry, right, such that if you were to go with your fingernail, it would kind of crumble out of dryness. Memvav nimset hare'an nifuhavo omedet. If the lung is on its own, just blown up and stays this way, right, and not because you blew it up, this is Tarifa. Memzain. Samiqaha re'a mipachad adam. Right? If the lung became dry as a product of shock caused by man. Memhit. Hasira regel ben mitahillat beriyatha ben shunnihta. If one of the two hind limbs, right, one of the two back legs were missing, whether they were missing from its birth, that it was born without one of them, or if it was cut off. Memtet. Or if it had an additional hind leg. If the Achilles tendon were removed. Nun alif nitelah kaved. If the liver of the animal were removed. Nun beth nital lehi ha'elyon. If the upper jaw were removed. Nun gimal kilyash yaktina bioter. Kidney that became very small. Nun dalet kilyash a kidney that was damaged. Nun he kilyash nimset bah lecha. A kidney that has fluid in it, right? Some sort of like mucus, like a fluid. Nun vav kilyash nimseu bah mayim achurin af'al pi she'enam siruchin. A liver that has in it water that is dirty, that is not clear, even though it does not smell bad. Nun zayin kilyash nimseu bah mayim siruchin. A liver that has in it water that smells bad. Nun het nifsak huta shidra. If the spinal cord were cut. Nun tet nimrach moach huta shidra unithmasmes. If the white or gray matter of the of one of the areas of the spinal cord became liquefied and like soft, right, so that it couldn't stand. And this is a tarifa. Samich. נקרע רוב הבשר החופה את הכרס. If a majority of the flesh that covers the rumen is ripped. Samich Aleph. נגלד העור שעליה. If the skin of the animal were removed. Samich Bet. נתרסקו איבריה מן נפילה. If the animal's organs, or one of the animal's organs, were smashed as a result of a fall. Samich Gima, nidaldelu simanin. If the trachea or the esophagus were hanging such that they weren't firmly in place. ס"ד, נשתברו רוב צלעותיה. If a majority uh, of the ribs were fractured. ס"ה, נעקרו רוב צלעותיה. If a majority of the ribs were dislocated or dislodged. ס"ו, נעקרה סלע אחת בחולייתה. That if one rib were dislodged with its vertebra. ס"ז, נעקרה חוליה אחת. If one of the vertebrae were dislodged. ס"ח, נשמט הירך מעיקרו. If the femur were dislodged from its or dislocated from its root, right, from the hip joint. ס"ט, חסרה הגולגולת כסלע. If the skull were missing a סלע, a certain volume of its bone. And עין נחבש רוב הגולגולת ונתרוסס. If a majority of the skull were crushed and damaged. הלכה י'. With that, we finish the list of the 70 טרפות. הלכה י'. אלו ה-70 חולי שאוסרין את הבהמה ואת החיה משום טרפה, כבר נתפאר כל אחד מהן ומשפטיו. These are 70 illnesses that make the domesticated animal and the undomesticated animal prohibited as a result of Tarifa, or because of the laws of Tarifa. Each of these has been explained. All of its details have been explained. וכל שאפשר מהן שימסה בעוף באיברים המסוים כבהמה, דינו בבהמה ובעוף אחד הוא. חוץ מטרפות שבכליה ושבטחול ושבאונות הריאה, מפני שהעוף אין לו חיתוך אונות כבהמה, אין לו מניין ידוע. וטחול העוף ערול כמו עיניו, ועינו כטחול הבהמה. וטרפות שבכליה ושבטחול לא מנעו אותן חכמים בבהמה כדי שיהיה כנגדן בעוף, ולפיכך לא נתנו לכליה שפינה שיעור בעוף, וכן כל כיוצא בזה. And of these 70, any of them that is possible for them to be found in the bird, and any of the organs that are found in the bird, like the animal, like a domesticated animal, right? So any of the right. So if it has these organs, right? For like the bird doesn't have 4 stomachs, for example, so those would not be relevant for the bird, except for only one of them that refers to the one stomach of the bird, and so on and so forth. So any of these that are possible, that can possibly be found in the bird, the laws in the domesticated animal and the bird are one. Right? So all of these are also relevant in the bird, with the exception of the cases of terefot that are in the kidneys and in the spleen and in the lobes of the lung. Right? Only those 3 are the exception. In the behema, they would be prohibited, but in the bird, they would be permitted. And now Rabbeinu will explain why. Because the bird, so first regarding the lobes of the lung, the bird does not have any crevices that divide their lobes like the animal does. And if we open up and we find that we do see these cuts, we do see these divisions of the lobes, then even if we do that, we don't know, we don't have a count. There's no known count of how many lungs the bird is supposed to have, right? So we don't know to say that it's missing one of its lobes because we don't know how many lobes it's supposed to have. And therefore those laws are not relevant. Regarding the spleen of the bird is circular like a grape, and it does not have the same shape as the animal, right? Or domesticated animal, we said it has shape like the tongue, where it's thin at one end and thick and wide at the other end. And therefore, it depends on which part of the spleen uh, uh, which part of the spleen the puncture occurs at. In the bird, it's not the same since the spleen is circular. Um, and the terefot that are in the kidneys and that are in the spleen, our hachamim did not count them in the behema. Right, they're not included in the count. Uh, so that such that they will be parallel with the off, right? If they would have been counted, then just as they are prohibited in the animal, they should also be prohibited in the bird. But our hachamim did not count them, so that we would know that they would not be prohibited also in the bird. And therefore, this is why our hachamim did not give regarding a kidney that becomes small. They didn't give it any measurement in the bird, uh, right? If they would, because it's permitted, right? So since it's permitted, they didn't give a measurement. They only gave a measurement of the size that makes it a tarifa. They only gave it a measurement in the animal, and so too anything like this, and these in the kidneys and the spleen, our Hamim did not count them. חי יוד א', ושתי טרפות יש בעוף יתר על הבהמה, ואף על פי שיש לה אותן האיברים, ואלו הן עוף שנשתנו מראה בנמעיו מחמת האור, ועוף המים שניqב עצם ראשו. And there are two terefot in the bird that are in addition to what we have, the 70 that we have in the animal. And even though these organs in the bird also exist in the animal. And these are they. One, a bird the color of its intestines change because of fire, and two, a bird that lives in the water, like a duck, its skull gets punctured. ואין להוסיף על טרפות אלו כלל, שכל שיארע לבהמה או לחיה או לעוף, חוץ מאלו שמנו חכמי הדורות הראשונים והסכימו עליהן בתי דיני ישראל, אפשר שתחיה, ואפילו נודע לנו מדרך הרפואה שאין סופה לחיות. We may not add to this list of terefot at all, because for all of these all these things that occur to the domesticated animal or to the undomesticated animal or to the bird, or anything that may happen to them other than these 70, which were enumerated by the sages of our earliest generations, and which are the courts of Israel have agreed upon them, right? Anything that happens other than these, it's possible that the animal may live. And even if we discover by means of our medical knowledge that in some case they are going to die, right? So if we discover that in our with our medical knowledge that that if the animal has a certain type of cancer that will cause it to die very soon, even though it is not counted, it doesn't have any of the signs of these of one of these 70, that is irrelevant. We may not include it in the list of terefot. And this is a very important halakha, that we see that the terefot are a result not of even if the terefot were uh, were identified by medical knowledge of the time, it is not the medical knowledge that the animal is going to die that makes it a tarifa, but rather it is the authority of the legislative authority of the court that uh, considered these to be a tarifa, that is what makes it a tarifa, right? Because the court, because our bedin gadol assigned these signs to the list of terefot, that is what makes them a terefa, and not the fact that they have a disease. And this is a very important principle that is very much like the melachot of Shabbat and many other cases in halacha. הלכה י"ג וכן אלו שמנו ואמרו שהן טרפה אף על פי שיראה בדרכי הרפואה שבידינו שמקצתן אינן ממיתין ואפשר שתחיה מהן אין לך אלא מה שמנו חכמים שנאמר על פי התורה אשר יורוך. And so too, even if these which the Chachamim enumerated and said that they are a terefa, even if we find out by means of our medical knowledge that some of these 70 do not cause the animal to die, but rather that it is possible that the animal may live even with one of these 70 cases of terefot. Still, we do not discard this list for our medical knowledge. Rather, we remain with that which our Hachamim enumerated, as the pasuk says, "Al pi haTorah asher yorucha," in accordance with the law or in accordance with the instructions which they shall teach you, meaning that it is within the jurisdiction within the jurisdiction of the courts to decide what is a terefah and what is not, and it is not up to the medical knowledge to decide. Rather, when the Hachamim legislate it, they use the medical knowledge that they have. הלכה י"ד כל טבח שיודע הטרפות האלו, והרי הוא בחזקת כשרות, מותר לו לשחוט ולבדוק לעצמו ולמכור, ואין בזה חשש, שעד אחד נאמן בייסורין, בין יש לו הניה בעדותו, בין אין לו. Every butcher that knows these terefot, he has a presumption of kashrut, of being valid for saying that his meat is kasher. Right. So every sorry. I'll reread the halacha. Every butcher that knows these laws of terefot, meaning that he ends up having a presumption of kashrut, right? And we have a presumption of him that he is a valid person, that he doesn't have anything that makes him invalid to testify regarding his meat. Right? Any such butcher is permitted for him to slaughter and to check the animal of his own animals and to sell it. Right? And we do not have any suspicions regarding him, meaning there's no need for any sort of supervision on such a butcher to check that he is not lying. Because we have a principle that says that one witness is sufficient and is believed regarding isurin, regarding matters of prohibitions, regardless of whether he has any benefit from his testimony or if he doesn't have any benefit. So even though he in this case he has benefit from his testimony, right, since he's going to be selling the meat, still we trust him. וכבר ביארנו שאין לוקחים בשר מטבח ששוחט ובודק לעצמו בחוץ לארץ או בארץ ישראל בזמן הזה, אלא אם כן היה מומחה. And we have already explained in הלכות מאכלות אסורות that we do not purchase or take meat from a butcher that slaughters and checks for himself in outside of Israel or even in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel nowadays, unless he was an expert. If you were an expert in the laws of Shehita and the laws of Tarifa, only in that case we may take from him, if he is the only witness. ואם יצא טרפה מתחת ידו, מנדין אותו ומעבירין אותו, ואינו חוזר לכשרותו, עד שילך למקום שאין מכירין אותו, ויחזיר אבדה בדבר חשוב, או יוציא טרפה לעצמו בממון חשוב. And if we find that there was a tarifa that he sold to the public, then we excommunicate him and we remove him from his position. And right, he obviously is no longer has the presumption of kashrut, of being valid for testimony, and he does not return to his status of being valid for testimony until this is the only way he can fix this, until he goes to a place where nobody knows him, and in that place he returns. He finds an object that is very valuable, and he returns it, meaning he could have taken it for himself, and so he could have kept this very valuable object and made a significant profit, but instead he decides to return it to the proper owner. Or alternatively, if he has meat that is his and he declares regarding it that it is a tarifa and loses the profit that he could have made from it by declaring that it is a tarifa. Right? And through either of these two actions, because he's willing to take the financial loss and not commit these averot, we see that he has done teshuvah, and this way he returns to his case of kashrut. And with that, we conclude chapter 10 of Ilchot Shehita.